Did you notice what helped our brothers maintain unity during that difficult time? First, despite prevailing custom, our brothers, black and white, supported each other, helped each other, and worked together to advance kingdom interests.
Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is having a good week. The dog is laying here sleeping, snoring. The May JW broadcast had an interesting video, a part that Stephen Lett did, and it was about segregation and unity. And I got to thinking about that, and I started digging in Beast-Zilla. Thank you, Atlantis, because he has collected everything, and there is a lot of quotes in here. So the thing is those of us of the later generations in Watchtower, we had no idea what was going on in the 50s and maybe a little bit into the early 60s. We all know that there was segregation in this country. As late as that, I mean, my goodness. And with now the focus on civil rights and equality of the races, and this big thing with Black Lives Matter, and it appears Watchtower kind of wants to put their 2 cents in all of this, and so they did that piece back in May broadcast about the segregation. So I have to ask, so you want to push this as a unity thing between all the races of Jehovah's Witnesses. I have a clip here to play.
We were busy in our ministry, so it didn't bother us very much. The black worked the black and the white worked the white. So we just obeyed the customary law of staying segregated.
So this black brother admits that the black worked with black and the white worked with white. And if you watch the entire segment in the May broadcast, you will see that they're trying to push this as a unity thing. They asked for, black witnesses to go down south to help where the need was great, and they were trying to preach in amongst all of the civil rights movements. And it's interesting because they say, we didn't pay any attention to that, we just avoided it and stuff like this. And it's like, why would you even want to get into the middle of that? I've got another clip.
One of our classmates in the 27th class was a black brother, a fellow student, and we became very close friends there. After we left Gilead, we were going to our assignments. We stopped at a convention in Alabama, and the convention was segregated. One race on one side, one race on another, and it was very difficult, painful for us not to be able to closely associate with our dear friend.
So this white brother then admits that they had segregation even at their conventions. I got something to read here. First of all, this is the 1941 Convention Report, page 59, under Immersion, talking about baptism. Over on the right-hand column, towards the end of the first paragraph, where it's talking about the Children's Day. Now, at this convention, they had all the children set in a section by themselves, and they released the book Children, which is a disturbing book if you ever get a chance to read that. But I wanted to read what it said here. Due to conditions over which the society has no control, there in St. Louis, the many colored brethren amongst the candidates were obliged to be immersed in a fine pool in a colored institution downtown, and to which they were speedily taken and thereafter transported back to the arena by motorcade, all in readiness and at their service, free and voluntary. Yes, friends, they had segregated baptisms even. Now, Watchtower claims that they had no control over this. This was federal law, and they had to obey. Brings up the question, then why don't they obey the mandatory reporting for child abuse and contact the authorities? You went against that law today. Why didn't you go against the segregation law back then? Which brings up another question. You have all these lawyers at headquarters, and you brag about fighting your right to preach on Sundays and your right to preach, period, all the way to the Supreme Court. So why didn't you fight this all the way to the Supreme Court against segregation? If you wanted to be a united organization of all colors, why didn't you fight this all the way to the Supreme Court? Oh, that's right. Preaching was more important. Selling literature was more important. You couldn't get involved in civil rights then. But you do now, don't you? Only now it's called human rights. And you run to the UN and the OSCE and all these other government wild beast organizations to fight for your human rights, don't you? But it didn't matter back then, did it? I have the 1952 bond volume. February 1st, 1952, page 94. Questions from readers. If the Watchtower Society is free from racial prejudice, why does it tolerate segregation at its assemblies in certain sections of the country? Is this not a course of compromise? It was in congregations too. They had black congregations and white congregations. Conventions, they practiced segregation. Watchtower's answer. Why do we tolerate the segregation laws and policies of certain governments and organizations of this world? Because Jehovah has not commissioned us to convert the world, which is wicked beyond recovery, and hence will be destroyed. When I was a witness, I thought all of us were commissioned to go to the world and preach the good news of the kingdom and try to make converts. I thought that was our goal. That's what I was out there doing. You mean Watchtower lied to us? That wasn't their goal? Jehovah has not commissioned us to convert the world. Then why are you out preaching? Really? Scratching my head over this one. Jehovah has commissioned us to preach the gospel. But if you're out there to preach the gospel, aren't you out there to get converts? Convert people over? Now, what should we do? Drop preaching to fight racial issues? What should you do, Watchtower? Drop all your human rights issues to preach? How much time does it take for you to go to these meetings with the OSCE and the UN and all of these other Security Council meetings? How much time and energy? Brumley, he gave a speech at that UN meeting about your human rights and the right to your freedom of religion. How much time does that take away from the preaching work? Now what should we do? Drop preaching to fight racial issues? We never have separate meetings and baptism when we can have them together. Oh, aren't they great? When they can have them together, they still have them together. But when impossible, shall we have separate meetings and baptisms or none at all? Shall we serve spiritual food to all, even if separately, or serve it to none? Shall we provide baptism for all, even if separately, or provide it for none? Should we buck Caesar's segregation laws when they do not force us to violate God's law? If you're a united organization, you would fight for that right. You did it for the preaching work. God does not forbid separate assembly and baptism, and he commands assembly and baptism. So it's okay to follow Caesar's law, and that's all they were doing, was just following Caesar's law, no matter how unfair and unjust it was. But they're at the front of the line at the OSCE in United Nations to get their freedom of religion rights. The video Mike did the other day, look what they did in France. That was about money. They were being taxed 60% on the sale of their literature and several other things that they sold. So they were being taxed on that. They sure jumped in and got that protest in, didn't they? Going on. So should we disobey God to fight a racial issue? To buck the segregation laws would bring a disruption of the witness work, halting of it, mob violence, and possible loss of life. Reminds me of the blood issue. Only laws prohibiting gospel preaching will we buck at that price. See, the preaching. And of course the 60% tax in France. They were quick to jump in and hand out millions of flyers on that one, weren't they? Some may argue segregation is prohibited by God, citing Galatians 3:28. I would say the same thing. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free man, there is neither male nor female. Something just occurred to me. If there is no male and female in the Christian congregation, then how come there's no female elders? How come there's no female governing body? If we're all equal and all the same in this organization, and if you truly do follow the Bible, then that scripture at Galatians 3:28 should make the men and women, the brothers and sisters in this organization, equal, with equal positions. Convenient how they cherry-pick the Bible too, isn't it? For you are all one in union with Christ Jesus. No, you're not. No, you're not. Male and female are not equal in this organization. Back in the 50s, the black and the white were not equal. Watchtower, wow. That Paul spoke in a spiritual sense and not in a literal physical sense is obvious. Oh, there you go. There's your explanation as to why. It meant in a spiritual sense, not literal. Since actually there were male and female, slave and free, Jew and Greek. Because of the existence of Jew and Greek, he specially accommodated himself in his preaching to such classes. So he became what that group wanted to hear. He was a people pleaser. His recognition of slave and free men we will consider in more detail since it bears directly on segregation. How so? Because segregation is rooted in slavery, is the outgrowth and hangover of slavery. Segregation, the stain left by slavery, is a lesser evil than slavery. So if the Bible does not instruct Christians to fight slavery, it would not sanction them to battle the lesser evil of segregation at the expense of global preaching. Oy vey, there is so much in that loaded couple of sentences. I don't even know where to begin. So if the Bible does not instruct Christians to fight slavery, how many apologists say the Bible does not condone slavery? It does. And right there, if the Bible doesn't instruct Christians to fight slavery, it would not sanction them to battle the lesser evil of segregation. See, there you go. I want to play this clip real quick.
The process of integration was successful because it was under Jehovah's direction.
Both black and white, we had the same thing in common. We loved Jehovah. And despite us, Jehovah got it done for us and brought us together.
Do you hear what she said? It was Jehovah that got all of this mess straightened out. No, it wasn't. It was people who marched, who protested, all colors, black, white, purple, green. They marched, they protested, they fought it in courts for civil rights. A lot of them lost their lives for this. That is how it got changed. Just like now. Is God stepping in to stop all of this craziness going on in the world? No. It's people who are standing up and saying we're fed up. They're protesting, they're marching. They're taking these entities to court. They're getting on YouTube. Everybody's getting a voice. That's how these things are going to get changed. Back to the article. Even within the Christian congregation, Paul did not protest the slavery of his time. Wow. So that means he condoned it. If you're not against it, then you're for it. Onesimus was Philemon's slave, and both were Christians. Philemon 10:16. Paul wrote Timothy, who pictured the society of witnesses today. Let as many as are slaves under yoke keep on considering their owners worthy of full honor. Why? That the name of God and the teaching may never be spoken of injuriously. Epic failure. Epic failure. Kingdom preaching and Jehovah's vindication are issues to keep foremost, not creature equality and racial issues. Friends, do you understand what that is saying? Because this is the same way they feel about the children being abused. It's got to be. This isn't just, me exaggerating here. This has got to be the way they feel, because they haven't done anything since the 50s. They didn't do anything about segregation and equal rights back in the 50s, and they sure as heck haven't done anything to protect the children since the 50s. I'm going to read that again. Kingdom preaching and Jehovah's vindication are the issues to keep foremost, not creature equality and racial issues. See, the vindication of Jehovah's name and the name of the congregation are the foremost, and the preaching are more important than the children. Makes me sick to my stomach. It really does. Paul also wrote, in whatever state each one was called, let him remain in it. Were you called a slave? Do not let it worry you. Don't worry, be happy. But if you can also become free, rather seize the opportunity. If Paul could say this regarding slavery, how much more so can it be said to those discriminated against by segregation laws? Do not let it worry you. It is no cause for Christian concern or anxiety. You're banned in Russia and several other countries. Do not let it worry you. It is no cause for Christian concern or anxiety. Oh, but that's different. But if the Lord's people are in locations where they are free of segregation laws or policies, they rejoice in the greater freedom and delight to be together in assembly. All are slaves of Christ, as Paul goes on to show. Anyone in the Lord that was called a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he that was called a free man is a slave of Christ. Surprisingly, some colored brothers have strenuously objected to this, protesting as offenses the use of the word slave in the New World Translation. I would too. That's very offensive. You guys are going to love this next sentence. Any who do not wish to be Christ's slave, whether white or black, can cease such service at any time. Yeah, we know how that goes, don't we? You get shunned, disfellowshipped, marked as an apostate. But they will be slaves nonetheless, only slaves of Satan and sin. Romans 6:16 through 23. Wow. Now over here on page 95, the first column, the second full paragraph down, Jehovah is no respecter of persons. Do you guys understand what that says? Jehovah is no respecter of persons, neither are his people. Really, Watchtower? Really? Jehovah is no respecter of persons, neither are his people. But the world in which we live is. Whites are prejudiced against colored. Colored are prejudiced against whites. In some colored communities, after nightfall, a white person would enter at the risk of his very life. To justify this on the grounds that the whites started the discrimination is not scriptural. Now, where the danger is extreme, should white persons enter these hostile communities and suffer beating and possibly death to prove they have a democratic right to be there? Should a white witness endanger his life to attend a meeting of colored witnesses in such places or stay overnight with his colored brothers there just to prove his democratic right to do so? Do you know how much trouble Watchtower would be in if they printed this in a magazine today? This is why this old literature is pure gold. Now, on page 95, over in the second-hand column, the first partial paragraph at the top, I'm going to start at the top. Can we not see that all classes of the human race are evil? That if we start reforming, we shall be lost in an impossible task with endless discriminations and many varieties or injustices to beat down, which crusading social and political organizations of this world have hopelessly fought for years. But this is exactly what Watchtower does. How hard do they fight to get out of paying these abuse survivors? Good Lord. Look at the case in Montana. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court to get that $35 million reversed. And then when they shut him down, they went back to the Supreme Court in Montana. And I got asked, how much did they bribe, them? How much did they pay them off? See, they will do anything to avoid justice and pain. And they'll fight, these social and political issues. hypocrites. For us to become like them would be to fail with them, consume our time in such reforms, lose out as Jehovah's Witnesses, and please only the devil. Wow. Now this last paragraph, and this questions from readers, I can't even read. I can't even read it because of the way they talk about their black brothers and sisters. I mean, to me, it's very demeaning. And, but yeah, do not let it worry you, you know. So, for them to do this broadcast in May, that was really upsetting. And when I seen it, I just had to do a video about it because I know that they're not telling the total truth here. You know, they are telling quite a bit of it, and they are admitting that they were segregated back then. But they didn't mention their comments in this questions from readers, did they? No, they did not. Now, before I go, I want to share a quick story here. Many of you know we live out in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And I was in the house, you know, working as usual, and I heard this squealing, this high-pitched squealing, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And the dogs just started barking like crazy. And so I went outside, and there was a bull snake, and he had a hold of a baby rabbit. And it's like, oh my God, you know, and I scared the snake away, and he let go of the rabbit. Now, bull snakes or gopher snakes do not have fangs, and they're not poisonous. So, you know, they don't actually bite their prey. They squeeze them to death. So that's what the snake was doing, is he was starting to squeeze this baby bunny. And thankfully, you know, I went out there and was able to, you know, rescue him. And the little bunny ran off and back into his hole. And, probably about 20-30 minutes later, I heard the same noise. And it's like, oh great, the snake is back, and he's got a hold of the rabbit again. So I went out there, and the snake was in the hole, and another hole, probably about 2 feet away, 2 baby bunnies popped out. So the snake had gone down the hole, and he was trying to get the baby bunnies again. And so I grabbed the baby bunnies, and the poor little things were just so exhausted from, you know, fighting this evil snake. So we brought them in the house, and this is a picture. Mike was holding them while I made up some formula. I used to raise kittens, so I have a kitten formula that I can make from scratch real quick. So we fed them, we let them sleep. I made a little box for them, put a little towel in there, and a little bit of lettuce, and I gave them some more formula. And then the next morning I took them out and I set them between the 2 holes that I had seen the previous day, and they ran over to the one and right down in the hole. So, and I've seen them out in the yard. They are growing and they're doing fine. So anyway, they were just so cute. I mean, just fit in the palm of my hand. They were just so tiny, and they were so exhausted. Just the cutest little things. So anyway, just wanted to share that. So you all have a wonderful day, and take care, and you know we love you. Bye.